right, we're back in the saddle. What's up? What's happening? I wish I could say I felt super refreshed after my time off. Honest to God, I feel exhausted today, but we're going to make it through. 4 o'clock here on the Team 980. Happy to be with you. And, yeah, Anthony, I'm back. I'm excited to be back. I got my butt kicked in a workout class this morning, and I just haven't felt alive all day since then. So that's 1,000% my fault. But it's game time now. I'm gonna get back into it, and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up because we have the end of the Wizards season to talk about. We also have some interesting comments around some of the reporting with Dan Snyder and where he and Jeff Bezos' relationship is or isn't. We have some other stuff coming up, but I want to just dive right in on the process of what happened this season to the Wizards and where they are. 35 wins. Tommy Shepard says, I am disgusted with it. We'll have more audio hopefully as the day goes. We got a bunch of quotes, but we're waiting on the actual audio. And I want to be able to play it in full for you. But Shepard did say, and the day after, by the way, he said, we're incomplete. He told Wes Hall before the game yesterday. Today, he's like, no, I'm disgusted with 35 wins. Just a disappointing season, to say the least. A frustrating season. And I think the thing that I don't want to lose sight of here before we play you some of the audio from Wes Unseld yesterday is the Wizards finished with 35 wins in a season where Vegas had them at 35.5. They, in their franchise management down the stretch, locked up hitting the under. Wizards bettors is, last week we're like, we're good. If we have the over, we're barely going to get there. This should have been a lot easier, but we're going to be fine. Sure enough, they hit that under. So this is not a team that underachieved by the best metric that we have, the Vegas win-loss. I mean, they don't air condition the desert because they lose. They know what they're doing out there. And the fact that they had this team, even though people like me, and I think I know basketball pretty well, and I know this team pretty well, I thought they were going to be floating probably closer to 40 wins. I would have definitely taken the over on 35. Would have said, hey, maybe they get some bad health luck, fine. But to be this bad, it's exactly what Vegas thought it would be. And they get that, by the way, with Kristaps Porzingis having arguably the best season of his career and playing more games than he has in a long, long time. So that's why this comment from Wes Unseld Jr. kind of confused me yesterday post-game. And I guess let's just go ahead and play it with that introduction. This confused me a little bit.
Just kind of the mindset of, we're not where we want to be, and certainly no one should be, happy with the results, how this season played out. But there's still a lot of positives. And, I think sometimes we get caught up, everything's about results and we lose sight of process. And so I think it's important to also embrace some of that and understand that, some of the failures, and that's part of success. You have to kind of go through that sometimes. So they're not, completely separate. I think those failures, those become lessons, and we've learned a lot of lessons, and now we have to figure out how to, take some steps forward. But I'm proud of the effort. I'm proud of the fact that we were able to go through some things this year and show a ton of resilience, to keep playing and competing together. That's something I think you can be proud of.
I don't have a problem with most of what Wes Unseld actually said there. I would just like to underscore the process thoughts. Yes, this team did not snipe at each other and want to kill each other in the way that last year's team did. They certainly had some young guys like Jordan Goodwin, incredible story, steps up, is probably a rotational piece for them, back end of the bench, but a piece you can rely on in that role in the future. I do think Denny Obvious showed some growth. Corey Kispert showed pretty significant growth, turned himself into one of the best three-point shooters in the league, and is a guy that I think they can rely on to carry a nice scoring clip moving forward, a guy they're going to have to get shots for because his three-point percentage demands it. If he can get better on the defensive end of the floor, then he becomes a really valuable piece because he becomes a 3-and-D guy, which is the most valuable thing a role player can be in the 2020s NBA. Beal had the most efficient season of his career. Porzingis had arguably the best season of his career, certainly since his second year in New York, his all-star year. Kuzma, career high in points. Like, there's a lot of things that would be considered positives. What I don't understand is how that is a process and that is good, because they finished the exact same 35-47 that they did last year, which is one game better than the 34-38 that they finished in 2020. And the 25-47 record in 1920 was obviously very bad. I should be noted, the 34-38 record, obviously a shortened season in 2020, 2021. They made the playoffs and lost in the first round. That was the Westbrook year. It's not good. They're not on the right track. There's no spinning this. The last time they had a season that finished over 500 was 2017-2018. They lost in the first round of the playoffs. The year before that, Scott Brooks' first year, is the closest they've been to 50 wins since the last time they had it, which was, 1978? 1979, I think. The 74-75 Bullets had 60 wins, and I think that was the last one. Yeah. So, not great. That was the first year of the Washington Bullets, by the way. They were the Capitol Bullets the year before and the Baltimore Bullets before that. Like, they've never had a coach go the right direction in recent memory. Brooks, his first year with the team was that 49-win team. And it's 43, 32, 25, and fired. Randy Whitman, 44-46 to 41. Gone. Obviously, Flip's tenure was not very good here. Eddie Jordan didn't really have a peak. He was kind of, arguably, Eddie Jordan's the best coach they've had since 2000 in terms of consistency. After his first year, at least he was above 41 wins for the entirety. They fired him after a 43-win season in 2007, 2008. Like, it's bad. It's embarrassing. It's so not good. And to say, oh, this is part of the process, we can learn from this, then what was last year? I think what you need to learn is, if you're this organization, that what you have is not good enough. Which gets us to some of what Bradley Beal said today. And a question about Bradley Beal that I would like to ask next as well, which is, does anybody actually like Bradley Beal? Moreover, does anyone love Bradley Beal? We'll get into that next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
DC has a new home for...
right, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So, talking about the Wizards, talking about Bradley Beal, and Beal had some interesting things to say today. We'll try to play that for you in the next segment. Anthony, I know that Neil had it, some of the audio from Brad, and Neil is in Neil Dalal, who will join us at 6 o'clock from Hoop District later on in the show. Beal was super interesting because he basically was like, yeah, I'm frustrated. Like, I'm mad. I don't like this, but I'm not the decision maker. I'm not Tommy Shepard. I'm not Wes Unseld. Actually, his quote was, I'm not Tommy Shepard. I'm not Ted Leonsis, which feels like the most antagonistic thing that Bradley Beal has done towards this organization in his entire time here. He has always been, we're doing this, we're doing that. And now, all of a sudden, because he's the guy with the contract and the no trade clause, he's like, well, not me. And then he got a little testy with some media, or not necessarily with some of the media, but like just in general towards the media, saying, well, y'all are trying to run me out of town. And what I would tell Brad is this: trying to run you out of town for your own good, bro, because there's a dead end here. Unfortunately, the reality seems to be that if you are here under your contract, this team cannot win a championship. Nevertheless, or they can't even, forget championship. They can't make, right now they couldn't even make the playoffs. Nevertheless, a conference final or again, that higher goal of ultimately winning the whole thing. But getting to the second round of the playoffs shouldn't be unfeasible before the season even starts. And that's unfortunate, unless you are trying to do that, because you are trying to get there and beyond in the future. And I think it's worth repeating that the Wizards' stated goal this year was to make the playoffs, was to win playoff games, was to be competitive in the Eastern Conference, even if they knew in their heart of hearts, and would tell you as much, that they knew they weren't ready to compete for a championship. They're big time, hey, we are in the middle of this process. Now, again, that's a harder sell when you're going into year 3 of a head coach, and what is this, year 4, year 5 of a front office change, when you go from Grunfeld to Tommy Shepard. It's also even harder for Tommy, who's been here since, 2003, I think? It's like, hey, man, you've kind of been a big deal for a lot of that, assistant GM for a long time, and then ultimately the guy in charge. But we all know that this is, in a lot of ways, ownership-driven. That this is because the owner, Ted Leonsis, refuses to allow any kind of tanking, any kind of franchise management, we'll call it. And he also wants to, he is loyal to a fault. That phrase has never fit anybody more perfectly than it does Ted Leonsis. He is someone who, once he locks in on, hey, you're my guy, he's going to try to keep that person as long as possible. And I've said this a million times before, that is admirable as a human being. It is bad for business management and professional sports. Sure, it helps you make sure that you keep Alex Ovechkin. But if the guy that you're keeping is not Alex Ovechkin, one of the 5 best players in the history of the sport, that's a bad formula. And teams who are willing to be more, or I would say not more, they're teams that would be willing to be less loyal, teams that are willing to be more business-minded, they are going to be more successful in the long run. The Sixers' competitive run started with them kicking Andre Iguodala out of town. Unless you get lucky like Milwaukee with Giannis, you're kind of, that's the way you're going to have to do it. The Celtics kicking Paul Pierce out and being like, hey man, time to go. We're going to go in a different direction, and ultimately trading him to Brooklyn. That's way harder than if the Wizards had to trade Bradley Beal. In terms of the fan base, in terms of what he means to the team, Beal to the Wizards, he's been a very, very good player and a good soldier for a long time. He's one of the best players in franchise history. That, all due respect to Brad, says a lot more about the Wizards franchise history than it does him. But, like, I think in most franchises, Brad would be one of the 10 to, like, in the Lakers franchise or the Celtics, maybe not. But most franchises, Brad would be a top 5 to 10 all-time player. And he's certainly that here. So, for Pierce, like, he won a title there. He's the best player for a decade and a half there. He defines an era of Celtics basketball which was very successful and obviously culminates with Garnett coming in and Ray Allen coming in and then winning a championship. But they make multiple finals. And Pierce and Antoine Walker were more successful than anything Brad has done here. And again, I'm not trying to dump on Brad. I'm just saying, like, there are organizations that are very successful that take alternate strategies. And I think that has created something for Brad that is kind of unfortunate, because all he's done is play pretty well for a very long time. And are there certainly areas of criticism? And by the way, he's played very well for a long time and then taken contracts offered to him. Like, obviously he's going to do that. But what that's created is this expectation on him to be great. When you sign the 35% max, basically a super max, you're expected to play at super max levels. And unfortunately for Brad and for Dame Lillard and for a lot of other guys who have signed those, Russ, there ain't that many dudes who are worth that. But teams keep giving it to them. And thus there's disappointment and trades and, all these things. And that leads to this question that I actually want to ask on the phones. 301-230-0980. And it stemmed from a tweet that I got earlier from someone, from Raven Wizard, who has his little name on Twitter right now is Sell the Wizards Ted Leonsis. So I think we know where he sits on all this. But he goes, in my lifetime, I honestly don't recall a fan base disliking a star player more than Beal. And I don't agree with that. And Anthony, you actually had a tremendous one when we were talking before the show. Who was yours that you put in the text?
I said, is Bradley Beal the Albert Hainsworth of the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, he's definitely not. That is 1,000% not the not the what's it called? That's not the comparison, because he's so much better than Albert Hainsworth ever was here. Like, Hainsworth was a complete and total bust here, couldn't pass a conditioning test.
Yeah.
Brad's not that.
I'm thinking more so from a monetary standpoint.
Sure, not worth the contract, but like, Hainsworth wasn't worth a vet minimum here. Brad's worth a pretty penny.
I think Albert Hainsworth, coming out of Tennessee, multiple Pro Bowls. I want to say he was an All-Pro. It seemed as though like he was, due for that money, or he was worth it.
Yeah, but there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of questions about him, and like no one else was giving him the contract that he got here.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's true for Beal, but it's also like, most teams in the NBA would have, if Bradley Beal was their player, would have done the same exact thing the Wizards did. Teams do. I mean, look, the Warriors just paid Jordan Poole a max deal. It's not a super max, but like a max deal. And that looks pretty terrible right now. Poole did not have a good year. And they're the Warriors. The Warriors are also the same team that drafted James Wiseman.
Mm-hmm.
That bomb. Not good.
Got rid of him.
So, like, good GMs make mistakes. But I think the question that I have more than, like, a dislike, because, like, people hated Hainsworth because he dogged it and it was terrible, right? But for Beal, like, normally, our guy Toby, who used to work up in Milwaukee, works with us now here. He does updates on the Fan. He fills in as a producer over here on 980. Great dude, good host. He used to work in Milwaukee. And he's like, for what it's worth, there's a ton of Packers fans who hate Aaron Rodgers. And it's like for the off-field drama and all that kind of stuff. And And that was clarifying for me. Because it's not about a dislike, right? Is there anybody that actually loves Bradley Beal? Right? Because yes, there are Packers fans, and let's even rewind it a couple years ago before Aaron Rodgers was this drama, full drama, very little or not nearly as much substance. Aaron Rodgers, right? And he's on the way to another team, and people were willing to tolerate the shenanigans because he was the back-to-back MVP of the league, and people loved him. There's 12 jerseys everywhere. Does anybody love Bradley Beal? How many? The percentage of people who are oh, my favorite player is Bradley Beal. Is it one of the smallest of any star player in the league? It's got to be the smallest of star players who have been in the same place for 10 years. And I think it's part, Brad has missed a lot of games. It's part style, where, Brad is not nearly as exciting as a Steph Curry in terms of just pizzazz. So, the kid bracket. But amongst season ticket holder basketball fans, adult basketball fans in DC, I just think they look at the contract and they're like, that dude ain't worth that. And it sucks for Brad. I would love to have his problems. Let's be very, very clear, right? I would love to have, oh my God, I'm just paid so much money and I'm very good at basketball, but people think I should be better or not make as much money. But it does kind of suck for him if that a lot of this is stuff. What was he supposed to do? Turn the money down?
Oh, no, not at all.
Right. And so this is the conundrum. This is the thing I don't know what to do with Brad, which is why I very rarely put any of the heat on Brad. This microphone does not receive a lot of flack for Bradley Beal. Now, he said something today that caught my ear in terms of I should have taken better care of my body. I want to flush that out a little bit, and perhaps we can get some of that sound later in the show. But this is just bad management. It's a bad understanding of who your guys are, and that to me goes back to the Ted level stuff. We can talk about Tommy with the draft stuff and some of the players that he's kept and signed and whatever. We can talk about Wes maybe not getting the most out of players in certain situations. But at the end of the day, it comes down to this. Ted Leonsis values guys that wear Wizards jerseys more than the rest of the league does and is willing to give them amounts of money that they should not be getting, not because they're not great basketball players within certain levels, but because you have a salary cap, there are market values, and just you're not going to build a winning team by giving them that money. That is the boiled down version of the Wizards problem. So it does lead to this weird thing with Beal, and that's my question. 301-230-0980. Who actually loves Bradley Beal? Are there any diehard Beal is my guy fans? If that's you, or you got a buddy, whatever, call us. 301-230-0980. We'll take those calls next here on The Hoffman Show.
You can listen to the Team Night.
Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And as of, well, last week, but we're back at it today, we are streaming live as well. YouTube.com/@theteam980. You get to see Anthony's shoulder shimmies. Sometimes you get some eyebrow dancing, too. We got some of that there. All right, so before we get to the calls, 301-230-0980. Here's the back and forth between Neil Dalal, who will join us later. Actually, I don't know if it was Neil's back and forth, but credit to Hoops District for capturing this audio. Here's Beal responding to a question about kind of where he's at and the general direction of the franchise and his role in it.
I'm at peace with how the year went. I'm not at peace with how we are as a team now.
Okay, so that's going to be the question.
Yeah.
Where's your patience level as you?
It's low, for sure. Yeah, I have a low patience level. That's why I'm like, it's not like I'm not angry. I'm definitely disappointed, but I'm not going to sit up here and show that. I'm frustrated. I'm angry, but I express that to the necessary voices and people who need to hear it, for sure.
Right.
So my question for Brad would be, and we'll get more from Neil and kind of about this back and forth and where it went later. And obviously we're also efforting like the full audio from not only Brad, but from Tommy and Wes, is like, whoa, oh, I'm mad. Okay, cool. Like, what are you going to do about it? You mean you're going to get your butt in the gym and insert training montage here? Is it mean, hey, man, like, I know you really want to re-sign Kuz, and I like Kyle a lot, but, like, we can't do that. We need to flip him, or we need to trade Kristaps. We need to do this. We need to do that. Like, I don't know what that means. Like, yeah, you want to know who else is angry? All the fans. You want to know who has no input on it? All the fans. What does that anger translate to, and what are you angry about? Because I can tell you, like, you're angry that obviously you won 35 games, but what factors that contributed to that are you angry about would be my question. And Brad admitted some of that, I think, is anger at himself, and I'll give him this credit, the self-awareness to say some of this is on me because I got to take care of my body better and I got to be more available. Matt Paris followed up on that. He said that some of that was related to the wrist injury, that messed up kind of the off-season workouts. And that's legitimate on some level. Like, you get work in the offseason, you just can't replicate in training camp in the preseason. That said, they clearly messed up that process if he missed the time that he did. You can't have a guy going in and out the way Brad did with the hamstrings this year. Like, that means they messed up and then didn't take the time to correct it. Which I think they said during the season too, like when he re-injured it quickly that one time, like that was not good. But it does lead to this question, right? Like the frustration, the media is trying to run me out of town. Like for a star player, the dislike of Beal, because it's not a bunch of media folks who are just like, this guy sucks, get him out of town. I actually think the media typically gets the Brad thing right. He's very, very good. He's not good enough to be the best player on a championship team, and the team around him isn't good enough to win a championship or compete at a high level because there's no one better than him, or at least if they are, it's only marginally. And the types of players that are surrounded are not the right fits around him. Like, you don't have really good defensive players around him. That is a problem. You can't have the Kuzmas and the Porzingises and the Beals of the world all on the same team because that's too much money invested in not enough defense. So that creates this somewhat combative but just realistic disconnect between like finances, talent, and success that causes fans to not really like it very much. So let's go to the phones. 301-230-0980. Anybody actually like love Beal? Anyone like, no, actually that's my guy, Hoffman. You got it all wrong. You got it twisted. Let's go to Little, get us started. Little, thanks for calling. You're on the Team 980.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, Hoff, and my main man, Anthony. Look, Glenn Consul, that's Bradley Beal, man. Glenn Consul, let me explain something to you, Hoff. You play a little ball, I heard, and then after I know Anthony play. I'm a football man. I play basketball, but let me use this situation as a parable. When Dinwiddie was a point guard, Bradley was a hell of a ball player coming off of picks. It's how the coach got to coach him. Only time a pure shooter need to have the ball in his hand after he done drained 3, 4, 5 shots. That's when you bring the ball up court. They had Bradley Beal bring the ball up court a lot, man. He's a turnover machine right now. What he did improving is his three-point shooting. I'm a football man there, Hoffman. Come on, there. You going hard on the young blood. The boys are pure shooter and an athlete, but it's the way you use them. When he come off of picks and then he busts a couple of shots, that's when only time he need the ball in his hand is the last shot of the game when the clock running out. After he done got his shot on, after he done got hot. Come on, man. We seen Bradley averaging 30-something a game when he had a hell of a point guard, running them off of picks. It's how the coaches use. What I would hope Unseld would do is go back and look at some film.
Well, so here, little, I hear you, but like that's not actually a West.
I go to a lot of Wizards games. I'm at the game a lot. And me and Glenn Carlson, we close. I'm at a lot of games. I'm telling you now, it's how the coaches got to use it. I would like for him to sit down, look at some film. Man, Bradley was having 30-something a game when he was a point guard, man.
No, he wasn't.
I used that one situation
He
as
wasn't
LeBron,
30, but all right, thanks. He averaged 30 a game when Russ was here. The 2021 season, he averaged 30 a game in 1920. He had some 30-point games when Spencer was here at the beginning of last year, but ultimately Beal averaged 23.2 points per game last year, and that trade didn't happen until February. And he shot the worst he had in a long time. The problem is that with you saying it's the coaches not using him right, it's the organization. I actually agree in large part with your point. I don't like Beal having the ball in his hands as much as he is right now. But let's get some statistics straight before we, dice that out. Beal, from a turnover standpoint, had one of his better years considering his usage. Like, he was 2.9 turnovers a game. Last year, the year Dinwiddie was here, he averaged 3.4. The year before, the year that Westbrook was here, he averaged 3.1. And then 19-20, he averaged 3.4. The years before that, he was 2.7, 2.6, 2.0, 2.0. Obviously, a younger player, fewer minutes, fewer, ball not in his hands quite as much, etc. From a shooting percentage, like last year was his worst three-point season of his career by a mile. He only shot 30% from three. This year, he dialed back the attempts, lowest number since 2015, 2016, but he shot 36.5%, and he was super efficient from the field overall. He shot over 50% from the field in the first time of his career. His effective field goal percentage, which weights 2s and 3s, was the highest since 2016, 2017. Like, Brad scoring the ball had a very efficient year. What I agree with that I can't stand that they do is not using him more as an off-ball creator. In what I think were his best years. And really it's about, hey, how did the team do? How is he best used to affect winning? Well, one, when he was younger player in 16, 17, 17, 18, and even to an extent 18, 19, he was shooting 7, 6.5, 7 threes a game. Right? Last time they finished over 500, he's shooting 6.5 threes a game. Averaged 22 points. All good. This year, he averaged 4.4. For a guy of his shooting ability, that's not enough. And by the way, the other problem is he doesn't get to the free throw line enough. You can't be both shooting 4.4 threes a game and only 4.6 free throw attempts. It's one thing when you're shooting 6.5 or 7 threes a game, getting 5 free throws a game. But if you're going to be a premier scorer in this league, like, you got to get to the free throw line more. Beal averaged 8 free throw attempts a game, for instance. The first year he averaged 30 and 7.7 in the second year. So, like, I agree with the point that they need to get him in more off-ball situations, and I thought that was going to be happening more with Monte Morris. But it is clear from what the front office wants, because Tommy talks about this a lot, they want Brad on the ball. And again, like, this is a problem. If you want to make him a glorified point guard that averages 23 points, 5 assists, and, shoots 4.5 threes a game, whatever, that's fine. You need a 2-guard, then you need to play him as a point guard. You need a 2-guard that's a higher volume shooter, maybe even Kispert, but you need that with exceptional defenders. So let's say you are going to go Kispert, who shot, I think he ended at 43% from the year on threes. Okay, well then your power forward can't be Kristaps Porzingis, and your small forward can't be Kyle Kuzma, or your center and power forward, however you want to play that. You need better defenders. And this is the problem. The roster around him is not constructed in a way that makes any sense with a combination of players. Because then if you want to say, okay, well, DeLon Wright's going to play point guard, so you have a better defender next to Beal, well, now I need him more as a shooter. Now I need DeLon to run the offense, because otherwise, what's he doing? Standing there waiting in the corner, not really that much of a threat. He's developed into a fine three-point shooter, but he doesn't have the gravity of a guy like Kispert that draws defenses out. So, I agree, actually, with a lot of Little's point. I would just not put the blame on Wes entirely, because this is an organizational decision to put the ball in Bradley Beal's hands. It just is. Them's the facts. We got a couple more calls. Vaughn, Steve, hang tight. We'll get to you next. Does anybody actually love Bradley Beal? Am I missing something here? Not, again, trying to be mean to Brad. It's just kind of the oddity of the situation that they've created here in D.C. 301-230-0980, the phone number. First, let's tell you, though, what's trending.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Really sad and bizarre story that popped this morning. Dwayne Haskins died just over a year ago. It was a year ago this weekend. And apparently, according to his lawyer, he was drugged on the night of his death as part of an alleged blackmail and robbery conspiracy. That, according to a lawsuit filed by his family. The lawsuit, which was filed last month in Broward County, Florida, lists 4 individuals, 2 restaurants, a golf driving range, and a hotel as defendants connected to the alleged conspiracy. The lawsuit says that Haskins' watch was taken for him, and that ultimately the driver of the truck that hit him on the South Florida highway where he passed away last year did not make the necessary adjustments to avoid him, despite Haskins being highly visible and other cars easily doing so. That is the lawsuit out of Florida this morning. That's what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We are always live on the free Odyssey app. Eric Flack, WUSA 9, joins us coming up here in just a few minutes. He is on top of the latest when it comes to the lawsuit that was settled today between the Commanders and the District of Columbia. So we'll get Flack in here in a couple minutes. All right, let's get into some more calls, though. Does anybody actually love Bradley Beal? Am I missing that? Has kind of the whole situation here, the way it's not worked out, the contract, everything, like, yeah, he's a star. Yeah, he's a good player. And a lot of people like him. Does he have the love in the same way that other stars do? It just doesn't seem that way. Let's go to Vaughn in Alexandria. Vaughn, thanks for holding. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. To answer your question, I think fans are so frustrated. If the reporter, when Brad made the response, you guys seem like you want me out. If you would have heard the fans, I think 99% would have been like, yeah, we want you out.
Right.
It's not really Brad's fault. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to disagree with your point. You said it's not West's fault. I'm going to tell you why it is his fault. Remember around when they had this streak about 3/4 through the season and they came on the radio shows and said, we're about middle of the pack offensively, we're about middle of the pack defensively, we're playing well. This is when they were going good for a while there, right? Everything was working out. You had a lot of positive conversation from the organization. Okay, tell me this. We finished with 35 wins. I'm going to tell you why exactly is West's fault. Chris Porzingis scores majority of his points in the first half. We struggled in the fourth quarter. I'm going to tell you, all our issues are in the fourth quarter. Brad turns the ball over in late possessions, how we typically lose the game. Denny is a young, fast, athletic guy. Why are we not getting as many fast break points? Kuz, we have no identity offensively. That's my frustration with West. And I mean, it points directly to West. His substitution patterns are horrible. If you look at, okay, you say, what are we good at? What are we bad at? Those are the questions directly that lays on West. Why are we not doing some of the things we've done early in the game that we had success at the end of the game? Okay, we get into the
because the
quarter,
players aren't very good.
Yeah, but you can't say middle through the season that we're top 15 offensively, defensively with them same players. That makes zero sense.
When were they top 15 defensively?
Go back and listen to Tommy and West when they had this streak 2/3 through the season. They said we were efficiency.
Yeah,
top 15.
They had a stretch where they had a top 15.
Them in the top 15.
Right, but like the idea of being good involves longevity. You can't have a 10-game stretch where you win, you play a bunch of bad teams and produce and be like, see, this is who we are. No, who you are is over the course of 82
games. This is coming from the organization, though, Craig.
Yeah,
but coming from the organization.
Okay, well, we have to, literally my job as a journalist, as a media person, especially as an opinion journalist, is to take what they say and be like, that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong. This is my opinion on why. Or here's, in this particular case, data to say that they are wrong. Like that they are full of it or contextualize.
I agree with you. I agree. So when we call, like I watch every game, I call Glenn and guess the guy that's with Glenn on the post-game show is a guy named Brad. I told him about my issues with Brad. Brian. He blamed the fans. Well, this is Brad's best season. How can you blame Brad?
Well, that's the thing, though. Is like,
the fans don't know what they're talking about.
All right, Vaughn, thanks for the call. This is my point. If Brad's best season leads to 35 wins, what's the freaking point? Like, someone has to shoot. I wish I favorited this tweet. There was an incredible tweet that chronicled yesterday in the NBA. Like, there's the kid from Memphis who I'd never heard of who scored 42 points. You had a bunch of random like two guys. Peyton Pritchard yesterday had a 30-point triple-double for Boston. If in a playoff game against the best teams and the best players, Boston put the ball in Peyton Pritchard's hands enough that he could get a 30-point triple-double, they would get their ass kicked. It's about efficiency. It's about what you do on the other end of the floor with the minutes. Like, these guys are great. These are the best 450 basketball players on the planet. If you give them opportunities over the course of a roughly 100-point or possession game, someone's got to score. And when you are Bradley Beal or Kristaps Porzingis or Kyle Kuzma, you get a lot of opportunities. Your usage rate is fairly high, and you're very good, so you're going to score. The question is, does it ultimately result in wins? And the answer is no. And this is my problem with Tommy's thing, where Tommy's yesterday with Wes Hall on the pregame show, he's like, we're incomplete. If we had just got, we had been a little healthier, then maybe it would have been different. Here's the real stats. I don't make these up. I just give them to you. You tell me whether this is good or not. The Washington Wizards in 2022-2023, in the 35 games that Bradley Beal, Kyle Kuzma, and Kristaps Porzingis played together, were 16-19. I'm going to do that math real quick. So hold on. This is terrible radio, but sometimes this is the way we got to do it. All right, so what I say, they're 16-19, so they won 16 of 35 games. That is a 45% winning percentage. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to multiply that times 82 games. Let's see what the number is. 37.4. So if you extrapolate their winning percentage with Kuzma and Beal Kuzma, Beal, and Porzingis over an 82-game season, they go from a 35-win team to a 37-win team. And you want to run that back? Now, I'm not saying it's a direct translation. I will give Shepard and Wes and everybody else over there this. If they had gotten more time and more continuity, perhaps they figure some of the things out. Someone earlier criticized Wes's substitution patterns. I hate that criticism because he had different guys literally, it felt like, every night. What's a rotation when you're just trying to figure out who's available? And so the idea that this is working, that you can take a big three that has a net rating of plus 3.3, a.k.a. when those three are on the floor together, they are only outscoring their opponents on the entire season by 3.3 points per 100 possessions. That, to me, says the buck stops with the roster. That doesn't mean Wes couldn't be better. It doesn't mean you couldn't get more out of players. It doesn't mean that substitution patterns couldn't have been better at times. All of those things. It doesn't mean, like Don tweeted in, that Wes doesn't necessarily need help. First job with the challenges he's had, he needs at least a lead assistant who has been through the wars to help him figure this out. I wouldn't mind adding to the coaching staff a guy like Steven Silas, who just got let go in Houston. Sure, fine, all of that. But the basis of the problems are that the roster is not good enough and that the stars who are supposed to carry the load are not good players. They are fantastic individual basketball players. But the collection of them, even playing well, arguably your three best players, have career years, and you won 35 games. I just don't know how you argue with that. Steve has been waiting on hold forever. Steve, I'm going to get you in real quick before we go to break. Go ahead. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how you doing? Let me just say this. I don't think that Tommy Shepard, Wes Unseld Jr., I don't think they're on the same page. I don't think they have the same philosophy. Wes Unseld Jr. was supposed to be a defensive specialist. Okay, that's the first thing. This team doesn't play defense. They don't rebound well. They don't block shots well. And as far as your question about Bradley Beal, I don't love him as a player. I never did. I think he's a good player.
Right.
But I think there's something with him. He didn't get along supposedly with John Wall. He didn't get along with Dinwiddie. I think he played his best when he was with Russell Westbrook. So he shouldn't have the ball as much as they want him to. I agree with you there. But the roster construction is way off. It doesn't make any sense to me. And Tommy Shepard, to me, is he's just like Ernie Grunfeld. I mean, he was with him for so long. He does have probably his own kind of thoughts, but it seems like I'm seeing Ernie Jr.
Yeah.
And as long as they continue down this path, I just don't think they're going to get any better. They might have an early draft pick. I don't trust Tommy Shepard picking anybody.
Well, that's been the problem too. Steve,
Yeah,
appreciate
Johnny
the call.
Davis,
Thanks,
hey.
man. Thanks. Sorry, we're up against the break. I hate to cut you off because it sounds like you had many good thoughts. I will say this. Ernie and Tommy are different. They have the same owner. That is the overriding similarity between them because the owner's the one that dictates the Beal contract. Is what it is. Give it the old, what was the guy's name in Michael Jordan's like security guy in Last Dance? Remember that guy, the meme?
Yeah, I can't think of his name.
I don't remember his name, but like that's the meme that we need right now. That's the biggest similarity is like they both got like, okay, this is your guy. We got to build around it. And by the way, we are always trying to make the playoffs no matter what. And so we chase instead of thinking long term. But I agree. Like the roster construction is not meant to maximize Beal. It's not good. It doesn't mean that the players aren't good. And I will say this. I will end on a positive note as we're way over on the clock. Eric Flack is going to join us here in just a moment. But the drafting thing is a huge issue. They've obviously missed a ton. Perhaps the most positive thing of the last 2 weeks of the Wizards seasons, I think Johnny Davis is going to be a good NBA player. Like, it is completely, I've turned on him. I see it. I see what they see. He sees the game very well. Go to Summer League, play well in like 2 or 3 games, then go on with the rest of your summer vacation. Johnny, like, if you want to next year start Brad at point guard and have Johnny Davis as your 2 guard, and he's like an athletic cutting guy who also is a 3-and-D guy, now we're talking about something potentially. They obviously need Avia to make a huge jump, Kispert to make a big jump, and then I would still do other things with the rest of the roster, but I don't think Davis is going to be the bust that everyone thought he was going to be, and I actually think he might turn out to be pretty freaking good. So that's nice. When we get back, Eric Flack has the latest on the lawsuit settlement between the city, the District of Columbia, and the Washington Commanders for Not My Beat here on the Team 980. All right, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on the Team 980's brand spanking new YouTube page. Make sure that you are subscribed there. If you're a YouTuber, you can watch the show each and every day. 5 o'clock, our new time for a little thing we like to call Not My Beat. Get an expert on the top story of the day. Today's top story, the Commanders have settled a lawsuit with the city of Washington, D.C., and, well, you know who we're going to have on to talk about it.
Today, from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live. This just in.
Not my
Am I playing it?
Our guy Eric Flack, WUSA 9, with us now. Whenever anything breaks along these lines, you know we're going to have Eric on the show. So, Eric, I'll ask you the question I normally ask here. What happened today? We know there's some kind of settlement, and there's kind of two different versions of the story. Obviously, what the AG put out, what the Commanders put out. What happened? What sense do you make of it?
Yeah, well, today the D.C. Attorney General announced a $625,000 settlement with the Washington Commanders to settle a lawsuit brought by the Attorney General's office, which alleges an illegal scheme to cheat district ticket holders out of their season ticket deposits for years. Now, this is a case that went back to the late 90s, early 2000s, where the lawsuit alleges that the team would make it really, really complicated for season ticket holders to get their money back, the deposit back, when they canceled their seats. In fact, that number, they said, of unreturned deposits was around $200,000. And the lawsuit also alleges that the Commanders not only knowingly did that, but then pocketed the money to kind of help their revenue. In fact, the lawsuit even says that Jason Friedman guy that we've heard about, who was working in the Commander's ticket office at the time this allegedly happened, went to the team and said, this violates their contract to do this. And the practice continued anyway. The Commanders are now ordered to pay, again, a total of $625,000 to settle the allegations. That includes being ordered to return $200,000 to former season ticket holders and pay $425,000 in penalties to the district to resolve the allegations. Now, as you mentioned, despite the settlement, the Commanders are still denying the allegations. Here's their statement. We have not accepted security deposits or seat licenses in more than a decade and have been actively working to return any remaining deposits since 2014, so almost a decade now. The statement continued, we are pleased to have reached an agreement on the matter with the Attorney General and will work with the office to fulfill our obligation to our fans. Now, it's important to note that in November, just days after this D.C. lawsuit was filed, the team, the Commanders, settled a separate lawsuit with the state of Maryland, agreeing to pay them a $250,000 civil penalty for basically the exact same allegations, as well as being ordered to return season ticket deposit money to people who live in Maryland. Another investigation by the Virginia Attorney General's office into financial improprieties, presumably this same sort of stuff, remains ongoing in Virginia.
Right, as well as the other investigations, which we'll circle back around. We might even play a game, Eric. We might have to see if we can get all of the investigations. But
name that investigation.
Right. But all in all, if the Virginia, one is along these same lines, or one of the Virginia ones is along these same lines, they wind up paying something similar. We're going to be talking over $1 million in terms of penalties, paybacks, everything for what they did. I'd also just ask, to me, the statement that the Commanders put out that doesn't actually cross any of the other information. Okay, cool, you haven't done this since 2014, but you did enough bad stuff beforehand that it's going why was the statement confrontational, do you think, in that way?
It's really curious because they make it, listen, the way this works, and how you have your own sources in reporting, they basically come to you and say, here's our statement, but please know that we deny the allegations. And so we have to put that out there that they deny the allegations, but they don't deny the allegations in the statement itself. We have not accepted security deposits or seat licenses in more than a decade. and have been actively working to return any remaining deposits since 2014. I guess that's the piece right there that they're saying, yeah, we might have had some leftover security deposit money, but we knew about that in 2014, and we've been working to get that back to our former customers. There's no big conspiracy here to pocket it, and we never tried to make it difficult. But the Maryland Attorney General, now the D.C. Attorney General, feel otherwise. In fact, the D.C. Attorney General telling me just a couple of hours ago, the evidence that we gathered during the course of this investigation demonstrated the team took advantage of its fans, its D.C. fan base.
Eric Flack, chief investigative reporter at WUSA 9, is with us, and you've covered this. I love when you get to cover sports stuff because we get to have you on to talk about it, but you do a lot more than sports. As someone who's covered these types of things, this screams like they were guilty and the settlement lets them out of it, right? They don't settle if they're innocent because why would they want to pay $425,000 in penalties? Yeah,
there is a term in law when you are accused of a crime and you plead no contest. It basically means you're not pleading guilty, but you know that the evidence makes you look guilty. And to me, these settlements are the Commanders pleading no contest. We're not admitting to anything, but we know that if we don't settle this, you're going to take it to a civil trial. So to make that go away, we're just going to find a number that works for us and works for you. It is worth noting that the settlement that the Commanders agreed to pay with DC, twice as big as the one that Maryland agreed to pay. I am told that Maryland actually had more season ticket holders that were impacted than DC. So the number went down, the amount of money that they agreed to pay went up. You can read the tea leaves there, but clearly the Commanders want all of this to go away.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Wow, that's very, very interesting for sure. When you look at this today combined with the Maryland one, is any of this ultimately, do you think, affect the sale, or are we talking about things that are maybe make the crossing the I's and dotting the T's a little bit, or I guess it'd be the other way around. You dot your I's and you cross your T's. All that stuff a little easier. This isn't the kind of thing that would have gotten in the way in any way, would it?
To me, and this is me just kind of giving you my opinion rather than me factor sources, to me it screams of let's get these issues wrapped up so then we can sell a team that has as few outstanding investigations open into it as possible. I mean, they're just checking things off. So we are now down to the Virginia Attorney General's investigation and the Mary Jo White investigation, as well as the D.C. Attorney General's investigation into the toxic workplace and the allegations in a separate lawsuit from D.C. that the Commanders, Dan Snyder, the NFL all colluded to deceive D.C. residents about the investigation into toxic workplace culture and allegations of sexual assault. The D.C. Attorney General telling me just today that case remains pending and he believes it will be resolved, quote, either by another settlement or a trial. So if you think about they have all these loose ends to tie up before they sell the team to Josh Harris or whoever else, this is just one more loose end that the new owner is not going to have to deal with.
So you talked to the D.C. Attorney General today. Folks can hear that actually here in just a few minutes as Eric's going to make his way over to the newsroom and be live in the 5 o'clock hour on WUSA 9. What stuck out to you from that conversation about either this settlement or what's left on the table?
I think what stuck out to me is that I opened my conversation with the D.C. Attorney General saying, they basically deny still that this happened, despite agreeing to pay this money. Did this happen or did this not happen? And that's when he said, it absolutely happened. We proved that it happened. It is disloyal to their DC fan base to do this. He also was very clear that he has reviewed the evidence in this second investigation that DC has, and he corrected me. He said it's not an investigation, it's a lawsuit. We have sued them. I have reviewed this lawsuit because, again, it was filed by the former AG, Carl Racine. He said, I've reviewed it. I stand behind it. We're moving forward with the lawsuit, and it's going to be resolved one way or the other. So, for instance, if the Commanders want to fight that one, the Attorney General of D.C. says they're going to keep that one going no matter who's the owner of the team.
Yeah, how much of that is intertwined, especially some of the misconduct allegations, team versus Snyder?
Yeah, I mean, it is the Commanders and owner Daniel Snyder colluding with the NFL. So this one really does focus on Snyder and his work with Goodell, as we know, to allegedly kind of create a deal where we're going to keep this out of the public eye. The Commander's name is attached to that, but certainly the people who were part of that alleged collusion are either no longer with the team, or when Dan Snyder sells, didn't even own the team. I mean, the Jason Wrights of the world, the people who are there now, came after this time period where the allegations are made. So, I think they're only intertwined in the way that they are still going to have this loose end to tie up. And that's when you talk about Dan Snyder wanting to be held, the
indemnity and all that kind of stuff.
Correct. Exactly.
Well, just another loose end tied. So many more to go. And one other thing I think is worth mentioning: we did leave out, I think, one investigation. We named that investigation. There's the federal one too, that's taking place in the Eastern District of Virginia. But
Correct.
The federal investigation with and that's like the Al Capone on taxes investigation. So that's fun.
I'm sorry. It is hard to keep up with them all. I start writing them on my hand every time I do one of these segments with you, so I don't forget one in the future. So thank you for reminding me of that one, Craig.
Oh, you're so welcome. I think you should write it on your hand, and then every time when we're done, just go, I can't believe we're still doing this, and then facepalm it straight to the noggin.
Exactly. I'll think about that for next time, because sadly, there's probably going to be a next time. But I do love
happily for me.
So.
Yeah, say happily for me, because I love having you on. If you ever want to come on and do something else, you let me know. But in the meantime, I will certainly be texting you to say, hey, what's going on when there's an investigation to be had. He is WUSA 9's chief investigative reporter, is Eric Flack. Eric, thank you so much, man.
You got it.
So good stuff from Flack, and he's on top of this stuff. And what I love about having Eric on for these is that he's got that perspective of what it's like to cover other similar investigations, as opposed to those of us in the sports world who are like, I don't know, this seems pretty bad, but I don't really know about these investigations. The saving face thing that we're talking about kind of at the end, where, or I guess it's a little in the middle, where, they're kind of them pleading no contest. This is because Dan still owns the team. And I don't also think the team doesn't want to be seen as oh yeah, we admit it. We used to screw over all our season ticket holders, and the lawyers have things to say and all of that. But at the end of the day, you don't pay $425,000 in fines and another $200,000 in Maryland and whatever they're going to pay in Virginia because you didn't do it. There's clearly enough evidence there to at least suggest that it looks bad, and it wasn't on the level. Whether they did it with intent or whether they just made things overly complicated because too many lawyers got involved, who knows? And to an extent, who cares? It's important that the people who got screwed are made whole. And if you want to take some of Dan Snyder's money and give it to the city, great. That's ultimately good. And then the last part is the last thing that we talked about, the indemnification piece, right? Does this ultimately make it easier for Dan Snyder to sell the team? Yeah. the less pending lawsuits you have against the entity you're trying to sell sure does simplify things. The problem is, or not the problem, the more important point is, though, that's not what's keeping the team from getting sold. That is what we're going to talk about a little bit more next, as Sheehan had a really insightful interview earlier today with a reporter from Puck News who had some very interesting insight that he reported late last week on the sale. AJ Perez has some more new stuff as well. But the short version is this. This is about money right now. This is a sale that is not about all of the other bells and whistles, hoopla, controversy, all those things that have kind of dominated the discussion, that so many people have talked about over the last year, and certainly the last, at this point, almost 6 months since this team has been sold. I think in AJ's story, he said 159 days this team has been for sale. Okay, well, at the end of the day, the most important thing is, like, you can't even get to the details of the contract and the indemnity, whatever, if you don't agree on a price. And that's what's holding this up right now. What is holding up the sale of the Washington Commanders is Dan Snyder wants more money. And the NFL is not willing to put pressure on him to say, hey, man, your deadline's up. You take the best offer. The best offer is Josh Harris. Take the offer. Because Dan initially thought he might get $7 billion. Certainly thought he would get $6 billion. And if he winds up selling for $5.8 billion, doesn't want to be seen as not getting the value for his asset. That, in a sense, is good business. He is holding out. Unfortunately, I think what Dan might wind up eventually realizing is it's like you're trying to wait for a better price buying an Arizona iced tea at a convenience store. Like, it says 99 cents on the can, man. There's only so much negotiating that there is to do. It's 99 cents. You go buy a slice of pizza. What's it cost on the menu? That's what the cost is. There's only one bidder. Sure, could you go somewhere else and get a different one? Yeah, but that's a different product. Like, this piece of pizza, right now, the menu price is this. And obviously it's a little different. And the big, component here is that there might be a guy who gives you a better price. You might be able to sell it for more because Bezos is lurking. But at some point, Dan's got to stop waiting and know that Josh Harris isn't just going to come up because Bezos is lurking. The scare tactics won't work. Now, if Bezos makes another offer, let's say Bezos says, hey, I'll do $6 billion. I'm not going to pay $6.5 billion. I'm not doing this craziness where I outbid everybody by $500 million because you're mad at something that the paper wrote that I own. Or because you know that I'm super rich. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not an idiot. Harris is 5'8", I'll give you $6 billion. We done? We got a deal? And Harris is like, fine, I'll do $6 billion. Then Dan's got a decision to make. But that's not where we are right now. We are simply at a point, based off all available reporting, that there is one person who has submitted a legitimate bid, as much as Canadian Stephen A. has tried. And that person is Josh Harris, with the help of Mitchell Rales and Magic Johnson. And it's up to Dan to either accept it or make this painful or more painful than it's already been for everybody else. But these I's dotted and T's crossed certainly do help. It will help with the paperwork on the back end. But right now, we are waiting on an agreed price. So what is the relationship between Bezos and Snyder? Is it perhaps closer and certainly not as frosty as it has been made out to be? Someone with insight into it joined Kevin Sheehan earlier today. You'll hear that conversation, or at least part of it, the best of it, the most important pieces of it, next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ant, how you doing over there, bro? I feel like we just had a stressful couple minutes.
I'm hanging in there, dog. You know, sometimes you gotta, roll with the punches, and I think that's what we're doing today.
We're rolling with a little duck dive.
Exactly.
That little roll.
Oh, okay.
Duck. Taking a couple of fitness boxing
Some
classes.
bob and weave.
That's what everyone just learned watching the videos, that I've taken a fitness boxing class because I can duck and I can roll, but I can't actually fight.
Okay.
I mean, I guess if push came to shove, so to speak, and figure out what I got, but much rather just throw some punches. Really, honestly, boxing is incredible as a workout. I literally can't do it right now. My body rejects it. It's terrible. And not even, if something happens, I get a bunch of elbow pain, and I was like, oh, maybe it's the contact, the reverberation. I did a 20-minute Peloton shadow boxing workout a month ago. Next day, felt like I couldn't move my arm. Getting old is terrible, bro.
I was about
Don't
to say,
do it.
man, you are getting old.
This is finally you believe me. Every time I say I'm old, Anthony's like, nah, you're a young guy. You got it. You're like, damn, you can't even punch air?
Yeah.
Sad.
Yep.
Sad. All right, so I want to get into what Teddy Scheffler, I hope I'm saying Teddy's name right, said earlier today on the Kevin Sheehan Show. Teddy is a reporter for Puck News. He covers billionaires. What a beat. Specifically Silicon Valley, so obviously Amazon, huge in the tech space, and Jeff Bezos is someone that he has been covering for a long time. And he had a report late last week that, while I was out, certainly caught my eye, sat down on the couch and was like, well, shoot, I better read this. That said, Dan Snyder and Jeff Bezos have actually spoken. That is, some other reporters were AJ Perez, our guy from Front Office Sports, is putting out all of a sudden, or Charles Gasparino, a.k.a. Dan's mouthpiece from Fox Business, was saying, oh, Jeff Bezos would be welcome to bid on the Commanders. Dan would love it. Dan understands that the paper, the Washington Post, that there's no editorial control from Jeff. He just owns it. Okay. Well, apparently the relationship is a little bit more than that. And in fact, it sounds like they've actually spoken, according to Teddy Scheffler. And the thing is, they didn't speak last week. Here's Teddy Scheffler earlier today on the Kevin Sheehan Show.
Reporting around Snyder, excluding Jeff from the process, some of the, I think in aggregate, some of the journalism around that was certainly confusing or contradictory. There was some reporting that was true. There was some other reporting that wasn't true. I don't know for sure about whether or not he was actually excluded. I mean, I mentioned in my story that, Dan and Jeff have talked recently, one-on-one, or at least, they've had a personal conversation about these things. It was late last year, so it was, it was a while ago at this point. But, I don't get the sense that the door has ever been shut fully.
Late last year, in Teddy's story, he says the holidays? I'm sorry. We had how many people saying all January, all February long? I don't know if Bezos will be allowed to be involved. He's being shut out of the process. Jeff Bezos is not welcome. Dan Snyder will never. There's no chance in hell. Tanya's so mad. Tanya hates Jeff Bezos more than Dan does because the paper said the truth about them. There was a quote in Teddy's story that was incredible. I literally cannot read it on the air because I would have to bleep a lot of stuff. But the gist of it was Dan would do a lot of stuff for $6.5 billion of Jeff Bezos' money. Nothing untoward, just that run around in an Amazon costume, something like that. I don't remember the exact details. I don't have the quote in front of me. I just remember it was wow, can't read that one on the radio. There's no chance that if Jeff Bezos is the highest bidder, that he is not getting the team. And that has been the case all along. I know, clearly there's some public shaming that both men seem to want the other one to go through. Or at the very least, people close to them want them to go through. There's people close to Dan that want Jeff Bezos to fear that he's not going to get the team. And they talked in December. It's fine. If Jeff wants the team, he's going to get the team. And in terms of him being shut out, Bezos hasn't wanted to be in the bidding all along because he realizes all he would be doing is bidding against himself. All he's got to do as the guy with the most money is sit back and let everyone else outbid each other, which has now happened. Tillman Fertitta, according to reporting from AJ Perez this morning, hasn't been involved in the process in weeks. Canadian Stephen A is bopping around trying to get people to actually finance his bid. There's no way it's going to pass the NFL's vetting. He's not a serious contender as of right now unless he can find another minority investor to come along with him. He doesn't have the cash. So as a result, we're down to one. It's Josh Harris. The bid is somewhere between 5.5 and 6 reportedly. AJ says it's just under 6. I'm going to say for the sake of this conversation, it's 5.8. That is a number I'm pulling out. But if it's 5.8, then Bezos goes, that's worth it to me, 5.9. Or that's worth it to me, just to make sure that this goes smoothly, 6. Okay, done and dusted. And that's something that anybody who's good at negotiating or understands business would have told you months ago. It's something Eben Novy-Williams, our guy from Sportico, who's been on the show a ton and who I trust on this stuff more than basically everyone else, as he's covered sports business transactions exhaustively for his entire career. It's exactly what he said would happen. He said Bezos is going to seem like he's out until he swoops in at the end and buys the thing. Or doesn't, because he wants to buy the Seahawks in a couple years. Or it's too complicated to figure out now, and maybe he'll wait for the Seahawks, maybe he won't. And that gets into the other thing that Teddy Scheffler said on the Kevin Sheehan show earlier that caught our eye. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Now, Jeff Bezos is no longer the CEO of Amazon, but he is their executive director of the board. He is still very involved there. He is also the largest stock owner. Amazon is a $1 billion+ partner of the NFL thanks to the Thursday Night Football package. And obviously, as media rights deals come up in the years to come, Amazon's going to want more than Thursday nights. That is the nature of how these things go. So would that be a conflict of interest? Would that be a problem? Could that actually be an impediment to the sale? I've typically heard no. Teddy Scheffler thinks it might be. Again, Teddy from Puck News.
I think absolutely it's a potential conflict. I mean, look, this is not I think there would certainly have to be, lawyered conversations about how involved Jeff could be in, approving media deals. It's not just Amazon, which, of course, has Thursday Night Football, right? I mean, like, who knows what the media deal landscape is going to look like? Jeff's 55 years old. Like, he could be the owner for 30 years. Like, who knows, what metaverse we're going to be broadcasting NFL games on in, 2052 or 53. I mean, Apple obviously is very involved or is very interested in getting involved with football, to say nothing of the traditional broadcast partners right now, which are kind of all broadly, competitors to Amazon in some way or another. I think it would absolutely be a conflict or potential conflict. Bezos is not the CEO anymore. He's the executive chair. That's not like he's, a passive player in Amazon decision-making. He's still the largest shareholder, like 12, 13% of the company.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And it's one that other owners have certainly brought up and been wary of. I think at the end of the day, where Teddy starts that answer is there needs to be lawyered conversations, and that is ultimately where this thing is going to end. There will be lawyers, and Bezos and the NFL have enough lawyers to get this thing done. But if the NFL can just be like, hey, Jeff, we love having you as a business partner. We really would like Josh Harrison, too. He really wants to buy a team. And it's the same thing. And Dan gets to go, I got to sell to Harris instead of Bezos. Silly Washington Post. Seems to be a win for everybody. But it's something to keep an eye on if this thing goes final. It's not like this is something that obviously I think would be worked out and approved before. Like Bezos, in order to submit an official bid, has to be vetted by the league, and this would be part of the vetting process. They might say, hey, we'll figure out the details later, but they will figure it out. Here's more from Scheffler on the potential Amazon conflict. Again, this is from the Kevin Sheehan show earlier today.
To some extent, I think recusals might not do it justice because to recuse yourself from, media deals, I mean, that's like so much of, NFL teams' revenue, as you're referencing a couple minutes ago. Like, this is not, the owner of a beef jerky company saying he's going to recuse himself from what type of beef jerky, they're selling at the stadium. Like, this is the entire league kind of present and future here. So, I know some folks around the league who worry profoundly about this question and, like, how do you devise a recusal scheme that doesn't make, like, Bezos this neutered owner where he basically doesn't do anything? Because if you're accusing yourself from media deals, like, what else is left?
Right.
And I think for other owners here, look, the NFL has a good thing going. The league is doing well financially. If you take the Harris bid or, frankly, the other bids, like, this is not an issue, right? And I understand that every NFL owner wants their team marked up because they want to sell eventually, or their heirs want to sell eventually. And so to some extent, you want the highest bidder no matter what, right? You want, Bezos to pay 8 rather than Josh Harris to pay 6. But if you take the Josh Harris bid at 6, you're not upsetting the apple cart here, right? You keep on rolling with the gravy train. The media deals keep on coming, and you don't have to, like, it's like, why add this extra complicating factor?
You don't. That's the answer. You don't. If it's something that can be worked out easily or ignored, they will. They'll take the highest bidder. If there's a better chance for them to make more money by having Jeff Bezos not involved in Amazon heavily bidding on everything, as opposed to the increased team value of one team that you really only reap as an owner if you sell, then they'll just be like, hey, man, we can't get around this. Let's just have Dan sell to Josh Harris, and it'll be better for Amazon too, because you'll have a better team in DC. Really interesting stuff. Definitely worth listening to the full interview. Teddy Scheffler earlier today on the Kevin Sheehan Show. You can check the podcast feed or rewind. He was on it. Do we know what time, Ant, that Scheffler was on today? I know that they sent cuts right after noon to us, but do you know what time the actual interview aired?
So as I look, he was on in hour 2.
So that's their new show's 10 to 1. So he was in the 11 o'clock hour.
Yeah.
So you can rewind in the Odyssey app to the 11 o'clock hour and listen. It's got the little chapters feature, so you can just click on it. I could have just said that. Just rewind in the Odyssey app, click on the Kevin Sheehan Show, and then be like, oh, scroll, Teddy Scheffler. Boom. They make it easy. Make it easy. All right, this here, it's the Hoffman Show. We're on now 4 to 7, so we are not doing real things real people said into real microphones. Next, no, we are going to do our weekend review. Tons of stuff happening, including trying to answer this very important question: why are NBA dudes who were teammates punching each other? That's next.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Speaking of NBA dudes punching each other, Rudy Gobert has been suspended tomorrow night. Yeah, the guy they traded 4 first-round picks for, their starting center, is suspended for the play-in game against the Lakers, a Lakers team that has one of the best records in the NBA since the trade deadline and a total revamp of their team. NFL draft news, probably talk about this on the show a little bit more tomorrow. A ton of teams, at least 6, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, have inquired with the Arizona Cardinals about trading up for the 3rd overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Of course, quarterbacks expected to go 1-2, so could a team who's after either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, presumed the next 2 quarterbacks off the board behind Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, be looking to trade up? Very, very possible. Of course, the Cardinals do not need a quarterback because they have Kyler Murray, although he is coming off a torn ACL. That is what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Neil Dalal from Hoop District going to join us here coming up at the top of the hour. Our new time, 4 to 7, although we are to 6:45 tonight. We got the Capitals here on the station. Nats baseball over on the Fan. So we got Caps actually tonight and tomorrow night. And then Anthony, finally Wednesday, we go to 7 for the first time. Although you were there with Scott and Doc a couple times last week. You did the full 7 o'clock shift.
I did indeed, and I don't look forward to, my drive home.
Yeah, we do really get the thick, or we can really get the tail end of the thickness of rush hour.
Yeah, just that extra hour, man, but,
It's the job of an afternoon drive producer.
I know.
We got the drive comes with the glory. You gotta embrace it, Anthony.
I think I'm still...
Or move closer and get on the metro like I do.
I'm still working on it. I
Okay.
think that's what it is.
Okay. Just got to adjust. So we do a segment. A lot of times we used to do it in the 3 o'clock hour. We're going to do it right now. We do it on Mondays. What else happened this weekend? Chance to talk about some of the other big stories in sports that popped over the weekend. First one is a huge, huge bummer, and it's a big freaking deal. The U.S. Women's National Team are playing their final 2 tune-up games before this summer's World Cup. Obviously, they are defending World Cup champions. They have had a pretty rough stretch since then by their standards. They did not make the final of the 2020, which were played in 2021 Olympics. They've had a couple of big losses to some of the best teams in the world. Like, they are still the favorite to defend their title in 2023, later this year, obviously, down in Australia and New Zealand. But the margin has never been thinner. Literally in the history of the sport, there has never been a thinner margin between the U.S. and everyone else. So losing arguably your best player is a big deal, and that is exactly what happened this weekend. Mallory Swanson, formerly known as Mallory Pugh, she got married to Dansby Swanson, the Chicago Cubs, over the winter. Mal went in for a challenge on a ball, tried to kick, and both players made contact at the same time, and her patella tendon was torn, which is a terribly painful injury. She knew instantly it was bad. And the U.S. Soccer hasn't said whether it's a full or partial tear. Either way, it is extremely unlikely that she is going to be back for the World Cup. She was also in the best form of her life. She's still so young. People don't realize how young she is because it's a name that even, I think, casual soccer fans, casual sports fans have been aware of for a long time. She made her U.S. senior national team debut, I believe, at 16, maybe 17 years old, way back when. I think she was 16 years old in 2017, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, Mal's been on the scene for a long time. She was on the 2019 team but didn't really play a whole lot, so she's already got a World Cup ring. But she was going to be a starter, and she had scored up until this game where she leaves injured on Sunday or Saturday. She had scored in every single game this year. She is coming off an MVP caliber season in the NWSL and was literally the best goal scorer on the U.S. Women's National Team for the U.S. Women's National Team. Sophia Smith has been a little bit more prolific in the league. And the reason this also, by the way, has local viability here, local interest, on top of the fact that Mal used to play for the Spirit, Trinity Rodman is probably going to replace her. So you're looking at Trin, who is all of 20 years old, will be playing in her first World Cup. I don't even know if she was a lock to make the team. She was very likely going to. Like, I would have put it at 95%. But now she moves into the likely starter on the wing for the U.S. this summer. And all of a sudden, the Spirit are probably going to have 2 starters, her and Annie Sullivan, who will start in the defensive midfield, most likely, on this team for the World Cup. And also, Rose Lavelle picked up an injury. Ashley Sanchez likely to get the start in their final tune-up game tomorrow, or their final, friendly tomorrow, also against Ireland. This one's going to be in St. Louis. So there's 3. Ashley Hatch probably makes the team. So that's 4 Spirit players who are likely going to make the World Cup roster, and now 2 very potential starters. However, it was interesting yesterday. Julie Ertz looked fantastic in her first action in more than 2 years. Obviously, her and Zach, Zach Ertz, a former Eagle, Cardinal tight end, they had their first child, and then she also was battling an injury, missed over 2 years, and she looked awesome coming back yesterday. So it's going to be interesting to see how she looks in the final tune-up games. She's also expected to sign with the team in the league. She hasn't played in the league in a couple of years, and get back out there. And does she wind up getting on the World Cup roster and playing big minutes for the U.S.? So Big weekend for them. Huge game tomorrow night. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. The other thing, what else happened this weekend? We got NBA teammate fights. And not only do we have NBA teammate fights, last game of the season, 1, 2, 3, Cancun. Not yet. Bang. No, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about teams that are in the playoffs. You had a dust-up. I wouldn't go as far as a fight, but a dust-up between Mason Plumlee and Bones Highland for the 5th-seeded Clippers, who at least get a couple days to cool off. But then you got the 8th-seeded Minnesota Timberwolves, who are playing the Lakers tomorrow. And they got Rudy Gobert punching Kyle Anderson for calling him a bleeping bleep. And now Gobert is suspended. Now, Anthony, did you see the Adrian Wojnarowski tweet about this? Because this is a Hall of Fame tweet from Woj.
I haven't seen Woj's. I've seen other reports, though, of what was said.
The wording on this is just, the Timberwolves had to suspend Gobert for throwing a punch, but accepted that it was a shot to the chest with no intent to injure Kyle Anderson, and understood that Anderson called Gobert, quote, you know what, repeatedly on a night Gobert was playing hurt, sources tell ESPN. Who is feeding Woj that information? And to what, like, is that Rudy's agent being like, hey, make my guy look better? That tweet benefits no one other than Woj going in. Just add that to his Hall of Fame resume.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and
it's one of the funniest tweets I've ever seen.
No intent to injure Kyle Anderson.
No, I just meant to punch him in the chest.
Yeah.
Give him a little thump.
Yeah.
Sure. I also love the detail that Kyle Anderson was apparently calling Rudy Gobert a little you-know-what all night, but Gobert was hurt. Sounds like they're having a great time in Minnesota.
I don't know. They might be, hitting Cancun in a couple of days. We'll see.
Maybe. I mean, the Lakers better not take them lightly. Because could you imagine if you're the Lakers and you make the comeback that you do and you pull your season out of the ashes and you feel like you can go compete for a championship and you lose to that motley crew?
Well, at least they get 2 chances.
That is true. That is true. We will have a full play-in tournament preview tomorrow here on the show. Next, though, the home team, they're not playing any more games, but we're going to talk about them. Neil Dalal joins us from Hoop District next here on the Team 980.
The Team 980.
Hoffman Show, final hour, final 45 minutes today. Capitals hockey coming up. Pre-game starts at 6:45 here on the Team 980. We got that tonight and tomorrow. It is our pleasure now, though, to head back out to the phones. Welcome in our guy, Neil Dalal from the Hoop District on a very busy day. I guess locker clean-out day. It's a lot more organized in the NBA. They have guys actually come to the podium as opposed to us standing around like I used to do when I was on the beat covering the Commanders. But, Neil, a very interesting day full of comments. First of all, welcome back to the show, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am curious, before I get into some of the stuff that stuck out to me, as you're walking out of the facility, you're walking out of ESA today, and you've heard everybody talk. You've heard Tommy, you've heard Wes, you've heard Brad, you've heard all the other players that you talked to. What's the one thing that was kind of lingering in your mind as being top of mind?
Yeah, everybody is, saying that, yes, this season was a disappointment. Obviously, the front office has a directive to, hey, we need to continue to be competitive. We are not pushing the reset button on anything. We still want to continue to, move forward with this core of Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, and Kyle Kuzma. Obviously, the latter of the two have decisions to make this summer. But, obviously, and, I'm sure you're going to get into it, the tone that Bradley Beal had, during his exit interview, he's not necessarily, saying, hey, he kind of took it as I'm not going to be visibly frustrated up here. I am frustrated with how things went. And so it was kind of hard to read the room for him of, well, does that mean you're thinking about making a move? And then it ended on terms where he said, no, if I wanted to be gone, you guys would know it. And so obviously, some of the headlines that are out there right now, people are going to run with. But, to me, I think it's more or less status quo of what we expected these last, few weeks of the season once things, finalized that, yes, they were not going to make the postseason.
So let's go in on Brad's comments and kind of flush them out a little bit, and then I want to get to some of the stuff that Shepard said. But for Brad, when he says he's frustrated, did he expound on what he meant by that? Is he frustrated because he feels like the organization failed him? Is he frustrated at himself? Is he just mad in general with no general direction? What kind of insight did he give on where that frustration is coming from and where it's being channeled to and what he wants to see change?
Yeah, and to your point, he didn't really expound too much on what is the root of his frustration. How is that frustration any different or similar to, years past? Obviously, he's been with this organization for more than a decade. Everybody is, pointing, and, rightfully so. Granted, no one wants to use that as an excuse, but, the availability of the key core players is probably the number one, source of frustration. They played 35 games together, Beal, Kuzma, and Porzingis, and, it is going to take a little bit more time than that. I think there's frustration also just of, he did sign his big Supermax contract. He wanted to come into this season with the chip on his shoulder, prove people wrong, prove people that, hey, I am somebody that is worthy and deserving of a Supermax contract. But, for a multitude of reasons, things just did not work out after the All-Star break. And, that's probably the biggest frustration right there, because going into the All-Star break, they were looking like, okay, hey, we can be competitive here. We're 17-10 in our last 27 games going into the All-Star break. That's a third of the season. That actually, ends up being a 50-win team on pace. But I think just anything that could go wrong to trip them up did, and then that's just the snowball effect of frustration adds up.
Neil Dalal, Hoop District, with us here on the Team 980. So speaking of chunks of the season and pace, right? They were on that pace for a 50-plus win type of season in that middle stretch where they had a lot better play and a lot better health. Fine. But they played 35 games with those big three. They were 16-19. You extrapolate that out over an 82-game season, it's a 37-win team. Which do you think, how much credence do you give the good stretch versus the bad stretch? And because I look at the data, Neil, and I don't think that this core can win basketball games. I think they're all individual pieces that could be a part of a winning team, but the collective doesn't add up for a variety of reasons. You watch every single game. You're there for most of them. You talk to these guys, and I respect the way you think about the game a lot. which team do you feel like they are more, the 17-10 stretch, or are they, a 40-ish win team if everybody's healthy, and thus they should probably think about doing something else?
Right. I think, you hit the nail on the head there. If everybody is healthy, which I think we know at this point, if you're a Wizards fan, that's not something that you can continually bank on because, more times than not, and for the Wizards case, often more times than not, that's not going to be the case. And so, Tommy Shepard tried to, in his, swaying of the narrative that he's, pretty good at because, he grew up in PR. He's trying to say that, in those 35 games, we had kind of tougher competition than, say, the average competition you would see over a full 82-game season. I probably need to, go in and dig into more of that of whether there's actual, legitimacy to such a comment. But, to your point, 16 and 19, that's not anything, profound. I think you might have also, tweeted out there, per 100 net rating, on off, it's +3, +1, for a couple of the duos in there. And, that's not really moving the needle too much. And so even if everybody is healthy and, unless people are making leaps and bounds improvements, which, people can get better. Porzingis says he wants to get better. Kuzma says he wants to get better. I'm sure they will be putting in the work in the offseason. But at the end of the day, I don't know if you can say that, this team is going to be competing for, home court playoff advantage in the first round. Are they going to, be contenders to make an Eastern Conference Finals appearance that they have not done in 44 years? The eye test is, like you said, bunch of really good individual players on paper, but for whatever reason, and, Bradley Beal has almost been the common denominator most of the time, is that, you put all the pieces together, the synergy is such that you're not better than the individual pieces. It seems like you're always a step below. And so, to your point, and many fans have been crying for this, the reset button has to be pushed at a certain point because otherwise you're just going to be middling, in this draft purgatory stage that they have for several years.
Neil Dalal, Hoop District, with us here on the Team 980. Do you think they can win? So Beal has his most efficient season ever, and they love to talk about that, and I get why. It's impressive what Brad did this year in a lot of ways, but it didn't contribute to a lot of winning. Can they win with this version of Beal with the ball in his hands as much as it was, or does there need to be kind of a reversion to him being more of an off-ball player and trying to find a different ball handler? And, Monte also had a pretty good year statistically, but, is that the right fit, I guess is kind of what I'm asking. Is that part of what a potential solution could look like, knowing that Beal does not want to go anywhere and that fans, as much as they might want a trade involving him, it's like figuring out how to maximize with Brad is actually the strategy that lives in reality.
Yeah, no, I think, again, exactly right. I think Bradley Beal is at his best when he is playing off ball and only has to worry about shooting. It's great and amazing that he has been able to, be a facilitator, be a, more of a combo guard and point guard at times handling the ball. That's all fine and well, but that's not, who he is. He is a deadly scorer in today's NBA at all three levels. Tommy Shepard, alluded to it a little bit. They want him to go back to being, that guy who averaged in back-to-back seasons 30 points a game. Obviously Russell Westbrook was, really great for his production, in the COVID pandemic season. Even when, Ish Smith was here, granted, Brad was getting up a lot more shots, but, somebody who can just distribute the ball to him. He's not having to be the guy that runs the offense and also scores in the offense. That is where Brad, has always been at his best. Going back to, the John Wall era, John would set him up great. And so Brad really thrived off of that. Whether, Monte Morris can be that point guard to, ensure that, okay, Brad can go back to being the deadly scorer, that he showed that he was, that got him, all NBA and got him a supermax. That'll yet to be seen. But, certainly I agree with you that he needs to go back to, being one of those, top 2, top 3 shooting guards in the conference to hopefully take this team to another level.
Two questions for Neil Dalal before we end our chat here on the day after the Wizards season mercifully comes to an end. First is just a simple, how do you feel like West did? I've had a hard time evaluating him because of all of the moving pieces, but how do you feel like Wes Unseld Jr. is as a head coach now with 2 years under his belt?
Yeah, and I would certainly not want to pound the guy or anything. I think people have to learn that 2 years in being an NBA head coach, it's very different. I think Kyle Kuzma summed it up well. He's slowly learning to be less of an assistant coach and more of the lead guy. He's slowly starting to get into the little nuances that you have to teach young players, whether it's, screening angles or, the spacing on the floor. He's, slowly making progress there. I think obviously given the expectations within the organization, that's not necessarily always lining up with the development Wes simply just has to do as a coach. I think he'll come back a lot better because of how meticulous and diligent he is, that I'm sure he's going to, dissect every little thing, during this upcoming off season. So, still working his way there. The defense is certainly not nearly where anybody would like it to be. That was supposed to be, one of his calling cards coming in, and it just really hasn't translated so far. They're still a below average defense. But I think, there is still hope. A lot of fans are quick to rush to judgment, and, that's what being a fan is most of the time. But he's going to be back. He has another year guaranteed on his deal. Most likely the fourth year is probably a team option. So, there's going to be a lot of make it or break it, in this upcoming season. But there's certainly much more room for growth for Wes, and, I think he's going to be up to the challenge.
Yeah, I do too. I will admit I'm a little biased towards Wes because I just really like him as a dude, and I feel like he has the right demeanor, and he's obviously very smart about basketball. And so it's like the components are there, so can he put it together? But it's tough business, and at the end of the day, results matter, and so I'm rooting for him to put it together, but we'll see. Last question for you, Neil, is simply this. What are their options now? Like, obviously, that's a very large question to which you will write a lot of words about at the Hoop District, and we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about some of it. But just kind of top level, like, directionally speaking, what are the ways in which this team can be competitive in, let's say, the second round of the playoffs next year? Like, is there a path to constructing a roster that can do that, given their current cap constraints, given their potential cap space, trade options, whatever might be on the table through your eyes?
Yeah, so, I'll give my response, with the presumption that, Kyle Kuzma will be returning and re-signing. Got some quotes up on, Hoop District for people that can read through of his exit interview that he held a little bit earlier on Saturday. And essentially, that's going to be a domino effect. If he were to leave, and leave Washington holding the bag, that's a completely different story. But,
right.
My thought is that he will be back. He might, get wined and dined by other teams and have a good time with that free agency experience. But presuming that he's back, Washington might have to overpay a little bit to do so. But if he's back, Kristaps Porzingis most likely will be back. They're going to have a high draft pick. This is supposed to be a loaded draft class. Whether they can get lottery luck for the first time since 2013 in Otto Porter, that remains to be seen. That would be huge if they can get into the top four, because even if it's not Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson, there are a lot of high talent guys and really athletes, which this team really haven't had a ton of since, say, John Wall days, that can really, be the biggest, I think, change the radar and trajectory for this team. There is some elite talent in the draft, and that's going to be their number one option. But unfortunately, beyond that, they're going to be kind of hamstrung. More likely than not, they're going to have to pay the luxury tax, which Ted Leonsis has only done one time, in his full majority ownership of the team when Otto Porter got his, max deal. And so they will have, sure, maybe the taxpayers mid-level exception, but, they're going to somewhat be cutting corners, and free agency is not going to be a huge way for them to improve the outlook of this team because, again, once you're in the luxury tax and you're paying that much more than just somebody's contract, and, as anybody who's, been following the team, payroll and being a positively profitable business is, the utmost importance. So, unfortunately, besides the draft, I don't really see, a lot of avenues for improvement from, the core roster that they'll likely be bringing back. But, hey, you never know. There's always silly season and trades to be done, and, Tommy Shepard is always on the phone trying to see what's best out there.
That is for sure, and I love your point about the fact that Ted actually wants this to be a profitable business because that has impacted a lot of decisions over the years, and we'll see how much it impacts it this offseason. Neil, great stuff. Great work today. I was following your stuff all day long. Make sure everyone checks out what Neil's put up at the Hoop District, and we'll have you back soon as as maybe some of the silly season gets underway.
Sounds good. Thanks, Craig.
All right, that's Neil Dalal, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Quick break. We get back, take a look at one of the big events on the calendar tonight, then wrap up the show with real things real people said into real microphones.
Yo, you sent me
the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Whoa, Ant, you all right, bro? That was like a full body, looked like you were getting like an exorcism sneeze.
Sir, it's allergy season.
Oh, God. Is there pollen in that studio?
It might not be in the studio, but I'm dying over here right now.
What?
It snuck up on me.
I thought I heard something through the glass and my headphones, and then I pulled you up on the screen.
I was that loud?
And you lit up. Well, yeah, no. One, your sneeze was that loud. Two, then, like, literally, I pulled you up as you were sneezing. I didn't mean to do that to you. And it looked like you were having an exorcism.
Yeah, I mean, hey, sometimes, the allergies definitely get the best of me. And right now, this instant, I think they are. Yeah. It usually happens upon, like, a seasonal change. Even though the season hasn't fully changed, that's when it typically happens. My allergies start killing me, and I struggle. But, once we get into the middle of the spring season, I think I'll be better. I think I'll definitely be better.
I mean, I'd hope so. We can't be having exorcisms in the middle of the show. I mean, I guess if you need to, exorcise your pollen demons. But jeez, man. That was a lot. All right, so you were like, yo, we gotta talk about W draft tonight.
Of course.
Big time.
Yes, sir.
Of course, the stars of the NCAA women's tournament, I would say, hey, don't forget about them. They're in this draft. They're actually not. Caitlin Clark, not eligible till next year. Angel Reese, not eligible till at least next year, if not 2 years. I think she's still 2 years away.
Yeah, she's a sophomore.
And she said the other day, she's like, I'm making more money at LSU than most people are making in the league because she's got great NIL deals. And that's, unfortunately the reality of where W salaries are right now. It means you can make more money NIL than you can in the W. Now, what I hope is true for Angel Reese and other players moving forward is like, they can get the same NIL type of money because, like, that's all advertising money. Like, you're still not getting a salary from LSU. So if you can get the NIL type of deals that are no longer NIL, they're just endorsements, plus a W salary, plus potentially playing overseas, like, your bag starts to get pretty big pretty quick. But WNBA draft tonight does have some phenomenal players. Mystics have the 4th pick in it. Everyone is pretty sure that Aaliyah Boston, the power forward center out of South Carolina, 6'5", one of the best defensive players, like generational defensive talent, who also averages 13 points a game, is going to go number 1 to the Indiana Fever. They had like 4 picks in the first round, and again, there's only like 12 teams in the league, so like I don't think there's the 4. I don't know whether it's first in the first like 15 or whether there's actually 4 in the first round, but they have a ton of young talent, and Boston is going to join that crew. And then who's going number 2, Ant?
It's a great question. I'm thinking Diamond Miller, though.
That's what everybody thinks. She a Terp. She'd be the highest-ranked Maryland player ever drafted, and she's not going to be the only one in this draft. But Diamond Miller projected to go 2nd. Some people think she should go 1. She's got more upside, but she's obviously got a lot to work on. And that's the thing I think that's hard for people who like maybe watch a lot of the NCAA women's tournament and are like, maybe I should check out some WNBA hoops. Like, the level in the W is so freaking high that you have players that are awesome college players. And it's like the transition, honestly, to the NBA for the very best players is probably easier than it is from NCAA to the W because it's a much more concentrated talent pool. Like, you will have second-round picks, and this is a problem that the league's actually trying to work through. Like, you'll have second-round picks that don't make their teams because there's only 10 roster spots or 12 roster spots and 12 teams as opposed to 15 to 18 spots in the NBA by the time you add in 2As and 30 teams. It's just a higher concentration of talent. But Diamond Miller should be pretty good pretty quickly. Everyone thinks that Maddie Siegrist will probably go, or a lot of people think Maddie Siegrist might go 3rd. She's the best bucket in the draft. She scored over 1,000 points for Villanova, led Division I with 29 points per game. Honestly, I hope the Mystics take her. I know that they're probably looking longer term. They're like, oh, we don't necessarily need someone right now. They could use someone who gets buckets. Like, obviously, Elena's great, but she misses a lot of games. And they probably want her to miss some games. And what happens on the night where she's not in? Can you get someone or a bench scorer who they desperately needed last year, a bench scorer who can just come in and fill it up? Like, hey, get the best scorer in the draft. That's where I would go if I were them at 4, if she's available, if the Dallas Wings don't take her at 3.
I like that pick for the Misses at 4, just because last year we had our 4s, on the outside a lot. And, Maddie, she's capable of scoring from all 3 levels. And if we can have her on the floor with Elena, be able to stretch the floor consistently, I think that would be definitely the best interest.
Yeah, I think it takes some pressure off Tasha, too.
Yeah.
Like, Tasha's a good scorer, very, very good playmaker, incredible defender. But I'd rather have someone else, especially over the long term, like getting buckets for me in big spots, and Seegers can get a bucket with anybody. The mock draft I'm looking at from M.A. Vopel on ESPN.com has Washington actually take a player that won't play at all this year. Stephanie Soares, 6'6", senior out of Iowa State. Really, really special player, but suffered a torn ACL in January, so she would miss the entire season. Other notable players, Beal, a lot of folks know from South Carolina, probably the best defender in the draft. They've got her going 7. Who else? Abby Myers, or Zaya Cook goes 13 to Indiana in this mock, so she's probably a second-round pick. Alexis Morris, point guard from LSU, goes to Atlanta at 15 in this mock. And then you got Abby Myers from Maryland going to Washington, who she's a bucket getter. So they have her getting second round, or the Mystics getting their bucket getter in the second round instead of the first. So that should be fun to watch where the Terps go. Those two should definitely get drafted tonight. Other, kind of local adjacent players or other folks that you may have heard of starting the tournament, et cetera. Kiana Traylor from Virginia Tech is on the board tonight. So going to be fun to watch. That's a 7 o'clock start on ESPN. All right, when we get back, real things, real people said into real microphones. We got some real doozies from the weekend. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. All right, wrapping up the show, 6:45 today because we got Capitals hockey coming up at the top of the hour. Anthony, by the way, what time do we need to stop talking?
It's a great question, Craig. I should get that to you.
Yeah, we gotta. Maybe that becomes our new bit. We used to always, you had to tease what was coming up on the Power Hour. And you were prepared like 3% of the time to fully correctly answer that question.
Hey, I went out with a bang though, man.
You did. You finished strong, and I'm proud of you for that. But we now got to figure out what time we got to stop talking at night.
Yes,
so,
sir.
We'll perhaps get that, and we'll do that as we head into the way we end the show every single day. Real things, real people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not gonna be sucked this year.
Real.
43-15. 43-15.
It's actually damn good.
Ant, you put this Greg Popovich bite in here, and I was thinking about not playing it, but we got time, so I got time. Let's hear from Greg Popovich on his final press conference to end the season, which he clearly spent talking about basketball, right?
And most of you in this room, when we were in school, we worried if Nancy would dance with us on Friday after the football game or something. That was our anxiety.
I put that Dan Hasty bite in there as well.
Stuff, the myth of the Second Amendment, the freedom. It's a myth. It's a joke. It's just a game they play. I mean, that's freedom. Is it freedom for kids to go to school and try to socialize and try to learn and be scared to death that they might die that day? But Ted Cruz will fix him because he's going to double the number of cops in the schools. That's what he wants to do. Well, that'll create a great environment. Is that freedom? Or is it freedom to have a congressman who can make a postcard with all his family holding rifles, including an AR-15 or whatever? Is that cool?
I have so much admiration for Greg Popovich for the intelligence with which he speaks on things that he cares about. The passion is real. The thoughtfulness is real. And ultimately it comes down to the fact that he cares. The substance is something that is really not meant for this show. This is a sports show. People often come here to escape. I would merely say that the example Ted Cruz gave, the senator from the state that Popovich resides in Texas, was that, hey, well, we arm folks at banks. There's armed guards at banks, and this morning in Louisville, Kentucky, there was a mass shooting at a bank. The police arrived in less than 3 minutes. Still, 6 people lost their lives. Seems fairly obvious to me what the problem is. Again, that's a different show. But I think on a larger context where sports and these things cross is that we need people who are leaders, and we need that people that we respect. And frankly, it's not even, for me, like, I agree with Greg Popovich on the solutions here and the problems here, even identifying the problem and what is actually a cause for this thing that only we in America deal with is something that is debated, right? But I'd hope that, like, someone might listen to me if they think that I'm smart about football, or they think that I'm smart about, and generally, like, the way I approach sports talk, and might hear me talk about something that is completely unrelated and go, hey, I actually think that guy's pretty smart. Maybe I should consider what he's saying. And I think that is, in many ways, the power of athletes, and specifically coaches, and specifically Greg Popovich, someone seen as brilliant, speaking out. It's one thing if someone comes in and just says, this, that, the other thing, and it's clear they don't really know what they're talking about. Perhaps they're just trying to sound good. Perhaps they're just trying to give a half, or they don't fully understand the issue. But I think when someone like Popovich, who so clearly does, who has put in the time, who has, by the way, a military background and comes to this with an elevated level of expertise on firearms for this issue, or, has a little bit more ground to stand on what freedom means as someone who's fought for it. I appreciate that. And while certainly I think a lot of folks listening that maybe disagree with what he said or what I'm saying might, as part of, because who it is part of your identity, might lash out and go, no, he's an idiot. He wants this. He doesn't understand liberty. He doesn't. He's wrong. Maybe there's people that don't. People who have the slightest of an open mind. That door is ever so slightly ajar. Who respect Popovich and go, hey, he's really smart. I know he's got like a military background. He's not a guy who just says stuff for clicks. Maybe I should hear him out. And maybe that helps move us in the right direction. Together or not. As for funnier things, or at least less serious, the bar is, not hard to reach there. Damian Lillard, he is not interested in a Portland Trailblazers rebuild, which is going to be interesting if the Blazers want to rebuild. But here was Dame at his exit interview yesterday.
I don't have much of an appetite for building and, guys 2 and 3 years away from really going after it. You know what I'm saying? And, I think we get Shaden at 19, and he's just different. You know what I'm saying? I think he, just being around him, his disposition, how he listens, his frame, his natural talent, and his ability, I think, that's enough 19-year-olds. You know what I'm saying? And you probably won't find one that will come along the way he has. But, I just ain't interested in that, being honest. And this is not a secret, you know what I mean? I want a chance to go for it. And if the route is to do that, then, that's not my route. So, I think we all in line with doing what we got to do to put a team together that we can actually go out there and get something done, you know what I mean?
To me, that says, hey, Blazers management, Shaden Sharp, he's allowed to stay. Everyone else, trade them. If they're not helping us win tomorrow, or I guess in October when we start playing again, goodbye. Anthony Simons, goodbye, et cetera, et cetera. Teams that, the question is then, what does Dame want? Who is available if you were to put Anthony Simons on the table, who's a very, very, very good player? But it's going to be interesting to see. And he's, or is it like, hey, man, okay, you guys are going to build around Shaden. I get it. Has Dame Lillard become on the table? And if so, what team can absorb that contract? Because that is a big one. On a lighter note, some fun announcer bites from the weekend. Our guy Adam Amin on the call with Stacey King in Chicago. Anthony, you're going to have to explain the cultural reference here because I'm a big dumb idiot and I don't know it.
Where's Patrick Beverly? There's Patrick Beverly. It looked like Uncle Jerome on Snowfall.
Drop the Snowfall reference. Bodies, 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 bodies. Him, her, you, him, her. That's the second last game of the season, folks.
Listen. This is what happens in game 81.
I don't get it because I don't watch Snowfall, but I'm still laughing because that was funny.
That was hilarious. When the Snowfall reference is actually very good if you've seen the last season, because there was this point in time where Franklin, I think he was off LSD, and he was just basically talking to himself, and he was like, bodies, 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 him, her, who's it gonna be? Bodies. He was just going crazy for like 30 seconds. I was like, yo.
That's funny.
It was fantastic.
Adam's a funny guy.
He is
funny guy.
Yeah.
Last but not least, let's go to the Western Michigan Whitecaps announcer, Dan Hasty, calling it a bat like he was at Augusta National. Oh, they got the music?
Hello, friends. A beautiful Saturday afternoon in Comstock Park. This is inning number 7.
Oh, we're going to have to fast forward because we're...
A fine hit. Deep to left center. Off the wall. Lucas Dunn into second base. Exquisite.
Oh, that's so good. We might need to bring that back tomorrow.
I got you.
All right. Caps hockey's next. We'll see you tomorrow at 4. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980.